today, what I want to talk about is when a person is really obsessed with what they do as a career, they're not just thinking about what they have to do. They're constantly thinking about how can I make things better? And in sales, one of the things is to number one, realize that your ideal client is going to have problems that it's your job to figure out how to solve. So this is where the law of polarity comes in, which basically states there's a solution to every problem, and the solution and the problem are connected. They're in the same place at the same time. So when you think from that thought, right, one of the things is that you understand what is your job. Your job is to help find a solution. It's not to get offended. It's not to get triggered. It's not to try to convince somebody to buy. Very often when I listen to people's sales calls, when they get to a part where there's an objection or a challenge by the potential client, they do something what we call, they try to sell harder, right? They try to convince the person, but you don't understand. This is going to help, and here's how it's going to help, and here's why you should do this. None of that erases the problem from the potential client. They still have the problem. So your job is to help find the problem, which means that in the idea of helping somebody solve the problem, when you're consistently thinking about how can I help more clients solve more problems from the sales process start, you're thinking about the marketing acronym, which is basically you're entering the mind of the person on how they're thinking, right? Your job is to be thinking, how are they thinking? It's not to reject how they're thinking. It's not to be afraid of it. It's to literally get in there and go, I need to enter the conversation in their head. You might want to write that down. Part of the learning process and the obsession part is always thinking about what is the conversation in my potential client's head. Because here's another thing. That conversation may change depending on industry changes, legal changes, political changes, cost changes, issues with team. Like, it can change over and over again. Here's where maturity comes in. The immature salesperson, and I don't say that in a negative way, I just say that as an absolute, is going to be hurt. They're going to be offended. They're going to be afraid. They're going to try to sell harder when they run into the problem. However, when you mature and you realize this is not about you, what you need to become, your growth edge here is, how in fact do I become a better salesperson? How can I help more? It's never about you. So you realize that whatever the problem is, if the need for what it is that you sell is there, if that exists within the potential client, if the desire for what it is, if that exists, okay, both of those things exist, then it's going to help create some urgency within the framework of how they think, but they're still, most of the time, they're still going to have some problem. Sometimes they're easy problems. Sometimes they're more difficult problems. But running away from the problem or trying to ignore it or trying to convince them is never the way to solve it. So what do? First and foremost, the solution to every issue that they have is there. In some solutions, it may require that you grow to another level to be able to present that solution. I'll give you an example. When I first started learning sales, I had an amazing sales coach, and I only had her for a week, okay? Because I did exactly what it was that she told me, and I learned this lesson very much. And here was the problem. The problem was I did not understand, how do I go past the objection that my potential client had? And the reason I didn't understand it was because it was still the objection part, where they were still excuses I was making in my own life. So when a potential client would come up with that objection or that excuse or that problem, I'd be like, yeah, well, that's legitimate, right? Because I was still lying to myself. So I'm thinking it's legitimate. So I had no way to help them past that issue. When I learned how to do that, and I learned that their issue coming from me saying that it's legitimate was complete BS, I was like, okay, so when I stop making this an excuse in my life, I'll be able to help them. So the seriousness in which I take what I do is that outside of a death, and even in some circumstances that may not be 100% accurate, there's nothing that's not worth changing to go to a seminar, to be at an event, because you're embracing the change for your life. Your change, when you say, I want to change, I want to make something better for myself, that is a life-changing decision. What gets in the way of that for most people is all the excuses that they've made their whole life, right? And almost all of them have to do with two things: money and their overcommitment to other people. I have literally told parents to change the date of their daughter's wedding to be able to go to an event. Now, some people would go, oh, I can't do that. Well, if what you sell has that seriousness of an edge, why wouldn't you? You're talking about something that's going to change a person's life, that the chances are, if they say no to it again, that once that excuse works in their mind, they'll say no to it forever. They have to get to the point where they go, nothing is going to stop me from making the change. Now, that's my industry. That's what I do. That may not be what you do. But there is still a certain amount of urgency with every single one of you, the things that you do. And you will find that the excuses that they make will equal that level of urgency, right? Because psychologically, they're part and parcel of the same thing, meaning that no matter what solution or whatever your product or service is, if a person is not buying it and they have an excuse, it's going to be equal to whatever the urgency is. Like there's a block there for some reason, right? And we know the common ones: money, time, other people. So the idea is you need to think of from the perspective that the solution is there. You can't accept it as an excuse. These cannot be excuses. And it's not about hitting them over the head with anything. It's helping them walk through the realization of the power and the commitment of their decision. So when you can see, because you use the law of polarity, when you can see the solution in their problem, you can talk to them from that place. You can ask different questions. What you don't want to do is say, but my product or service is going to do this. You would ask a completely different question. The fourth question in the series of sales question is, what happens if you don't buy this product? Some version of that question. If you don't buy, you're following the law of cause and effect. And within the law of cause and effect, there's going to be an effect because your causation was not to buy. So what's the outcome of that? It has an outcome. Let's play it all the way out. What happens if you don't do it, right? Now remember, they just got telling you they had a need, they had a desire, they want what it is that you have, or they want the outcome or whatever it is that it provides. If they don't do it, what happens if they don't buy or use your product? You have to know that. And you have to know that for every person that you have a sales conversation with. You know the positive outcome of what you sell, but what's the negative outcome? Do you always have to use that in a sales conversation? No. If you've got somebody that's excited, you don't have to use the negative one, right? You can excite the outcome. You could say, this is going to be so amazing. You're going to get X, Y, Z because you're deciding to do this. That's a great thing. So you're stepping into the future as if they bought the product or the service and what the outcome is, and you're like celebrating that with them. But if there's a hesitation, then the idea is, well, what is the block that's causing that, right? Now with money, here's what we know. Everybody on the planet has the same amount of money. Everybody on the planet has the same amount of money. Now you're not going to say that to them, right? Because they will look at you like you just crawled, out of an egg or something. Like you're not going to say that to them, right? They wouldn't understand the language. They've never heard that before, right? As a matter of fact, it would probably trigger the hell out of a lot of people. But you know that that's true. And you know that people always spend money. They find the money for the things that they want, even broke people. Even broke people. They always find the money for the things that they want. So if you understand that, then the idea is, let's say you're in a sales conversation and they say, I really like what you've got, and it might be a problem right now because we can't afford that, or we don't have the money. So if somebody said that to me, I would say, so what you're saying to me is if you did have the money, you'd want to buy what it is that I'm offering. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So here's how we solve this problem. The idea is, where do you find the money? Because the money has to be there someplace. If you want it, it's got to be there. Would you be open for me to help you coming up with solutions to find the money? Now, here, one of two things is going to happen. If they were using an excuse because they didn't want to tell you no, they're going to tell you no to this. If they were really honest and they do want what you have, they're going to be like, yeah, help me. Because finding the money is a skill set for everybody that most people don't have. That's why you see people get into such trouble with credit cards. A long time ago, they realized that people could not control their desires to purchase things that they really wanted. And they figured out, how do we make money off of that, right? So they came up with credit cards because that's an easy way to make money off of it, right? Selling debt is a huge business. Huge, 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 huge. They don't make money off of you paying off the debt. They make money off of you paying the debt periodically over time, right? So think about this for a moment. But the average person, if you were to say to them, hey, where could you come up for the few $1,000s for something that they want? The first thing that they do if they don't have it in the savings account is they go to a credit card. They go to a credit card. So asking people, do you have a credit card? Do you have savings? Do you have a 401k? Do you have other things that are investments that it would be probably be more prudent to spend the money now and then replace whatever that was for later, if that's true for what it is that you're selling? People have all different kinds of places where there might be money, but they don't think about it as the money is for right now. They don't think that way. If they're saving for a child's college education, they'll probably say, I don't have the money, but they may have 20 grand in a set-aside account for their kids' education. They don't think about it that way unless you say, where are other places that you have money that you may not have set aside for this, but we could actually use for this and you could replace it later. I cannot tell you how many people have purchased once you help them think past that. Now, let's say that they don't. Where else could they find the money? Is there somebody in their family or friends that they could borrow money from? Is there something in their life that they have that they could sell? Now, as I'm talking about these things, you have to ask yourself, if any of you are feeling uncomfortable with this, you got to ask yourself, why, right? Why? My first seminar to go to it, I sold my boat, which was a dream goal that I had. But I wanted to change more and I wanted to learn more than I wanted the boat. So I sold the boat. I've borrowed money the whole 7 years that I was studying. Every penny that I spent on flights, hotels, seminars, food, you name it, buying extra products from people that were selling stuff at the back of the room, every bit of it was on credit. I wouldn't be here today without that credit. Wouldn't be here. You have to think from the perspective of, do you have something that helps somebody? Because here's the truth. The truth is, I don't care what you're selling, your ideal client's going to spend that money on something. Is it going to give them the benefit that what you have is going to give them? That's the key. Because most people spend money on crap. They don't spend money on anything that is going to make a difference for them. And you lawyers, think about this, right? Because a lot of it just needs to be turned into a positive, especially for criminal law. Because people often look at themselves based at the level of their own self-esteem. So you want to seriously think about this. You are a problem solver. Your job is to figure out how to solve the problem. If they want to buy, if they have a need, if they have the urgency, then the way for them to buy is there. Your job is to help them find the money. Whether you're sitting in the boardroom or you're sitting with partners or you're sitting with investors, your job is to help to figure out how to solve those problems. And remember, you don't solve the problem by telling them how wonderful you are and your product is. You solve the problem by stepping into the problem with them and coming from a place of higher understanding and skill to solve the problem. So the idea for today is always be thinking about, how do I help them solve the problems? What's the conversation in their head? Every time you talk to a customer or client, pay very close attention to what you hear them saying, because they're telling you what's going on in their mind. And you're listening with a completely different ear than just a random person would be listening. You're listening to the things that they tell you that they don't have any consciousness around, that might be very important or might be very scary for them, or maybe very uncertain. Because the more you know, the more sales you have. Why? Because you can address the conversation that's happening in their head. You can enter it where they are, not where you are. And that is really the single key to making sales. What do they really want, right? And helping them get past difficulties, blocks, objections, excuses, fears that are keeping them from purchasing what it is that they want. And it takes practice. You've got to practice this. It's a skill, right? And if it's difficult for you, ask yourself, where do you have the same problem in your own life? Because the fastest way to get better is to solve the problem in your life. If you're not paying bills on time, if you're not coming up with money when you need it, if you're using money as an excuse not to do something, if the reason that you don't buy something is because you don't have the money, if you're not purchasing things because of other people in your life that you really want, all of those things, you're going to be completely out of integrity with trying to help somebody else over that hump if you don't get over it yourself. Think about the energy of a salesperson. It's got to be peak, peak, peak. It's got to be up. It's got to be strong. It's got to be confident. It's got to be convincing in its confidence, right? You're a person of increase because you've learned a skill set. You've got beyond challenges in your own life. Now you can help them. There's a solution to everything. There's nothing to fear. There's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to doubt. Why? Because there's a solution to everything. There's nothing that can happen that you can't find the solution to. When you really understand that, fear goes away. What's there to be afraid of? Things are going to go wrong. 100% of things are going to go wrong, but there's always a solution. And it's always right there next to the thing that went wrong. In fact, they're attached. They're attached in the center. Finding those solutions is always thinking about, number one, the solution is always there. It must be there. The fact that I can't see it makes no difference. It doesn't mean that it's not there. It's 100% there. So there's nothing to be afraid of. And when you find the solution, you can take the action, and then you have the result. You have the effect. Knowing that makes you an extraordinarily powerful salesperson, because people want you to lead them. The impression of increase. It's what all people are seeking. Somebody in their life to help them get the things that they want. So if you got the ideal client, you understand their location, and you understand your message, the next thing is the problem solving. And you will make sale after sale after sale after sale.